We're starting a new series last week called Thrive. And by the way, I was reminded I put the wrong slide up on my title slide. So Dave, thank you for kind of bridging the gap for me. To thrive. We all find ourselves at times in our lives where life is difficult. Things don't work out the way we planned. And we find ourselves saying, I'm happy just to survive. Forget the thrive thing. Just let me wake up in the morning and breathe. And we began to talk about this idea, though, that in England, there was a time when pineapples were so precious that they would try to grow pineapples in special warm houses. And they would they would hire people to keep fires constantly burning so they could keep their greenhouses warm all night, all day, and just so they could grow pineapples. And can I say this? A pineapple can survive in England under the right circumstances. But pineapples will never thrive in England. To this day, even after hundreds of years of growing pineapples in England, there is still not a pineapple farm in England. However, if you go to South America today, go to Hawaii, you will find pineapple farm after pineapple farm with the most juicy, beautiful pineapples that you can ever imagine. However, though pineapples can survive, and not only survive, thrive in places like South America, Hawaii, Queensland, in order for it to thrive, it still must be cultivated. Even in a place that has the right temperature, all the right growing conditions, when everything is given to its favor, in order for it to thrive, it must then be cultivated. It must be tended. It must be looked after. Last week we began to look at Peter's writing to a group of churches where he says, as a follower of Jesus Christ, you were not intended to simply survive. Now, as he's writing this, just hang on and kind of put this into your mind a moment. As Peter's writing this, he's writing this in a prison. It is believed at this time that Rome has burned. It's after AD 64. Nobody's sure exactly what time. The exact date of this letter is not really known. We know it's somewhere probably between 64 and 68 AD. Rome has burned, and Nero is now using this little no-name group of Christians. They have no influence. They're a group of nobodies, and so nobody misses them. And he begins to put blame on them. He begins to stop and say, see, there's this little group, and here's the reason why Rome burned. And in the process, persecution began to flare up all over the Roman Empire. Peter finds himself arrested. Paul also is probably in prison at the same time in Rome. And they're sitting there knowing they are going to be put to death. Peter is he's not sitting there going, maybe I can get out of this. Maybe he knows what is about to happen. And in the middle of this, he looks out and he sees other Christians and other small churches starting to go through the same persecution. As that persecution hit Rome, it's now beginning to filter down to all of the little Roman cities around. And Paul begins to write them, and he begins to say, you were not made to simply survive. You were made to thrive under any condition. Hang on a moment. Peter's looking at him and saying, nope, you need to understand that you have been given every promise God has done something so big in you and for you that you were not made to survive. You were made to thrive under every circumstance that you find yourself. In prison, about to be put to death. And he's not writing saying, hey guys, look at me, feel sorry for me. He's saying, no, we are here and we are going to thrive even in this circumstance. Well, how do you do that? We know God has done something for us. We know that. He stops though and he says, in order for you to thrive, you've been given everything, but it now must be cultivated. You've given every opportunity. Now you need to do your part. So let's go to 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5. And he looks at us and he reminds us of a little promise, or he reminds us of a certain part that is up to us. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5. And here's what he says. In view of this, and the in view of this is because he has given you every promise, he has given you everything that you need to thrive. Now what? Make every effort to respond to God's promises. Here's the part where he says, you know what? This is a two-part process. You have what you need. You have been given everything. Now, put it into practice. The ability to thrive in any circumstance only comes when we begin to cultivate certain habits in our life. Paul goes on to tell us what we need to put into play in our life. What is it that we need to cultivate? If we've been given everything, if we've been given all of God's promises and his strength to go on, how do we cultivate it so that we don't just survive in our life, but we can actually thrive? Well, he goes on, and we're going to go to finish off verse 5 a little bit. Here's what he tells us. In view of all this, make every effort to respond to God's promises. Supplement your faith with a generous provision of moral excellence. Okay. If you're like me, you start reading this and you go, okay, what is it we're needing to cultivate? Paul looks at us and he says, since your faith has been built on a promise, now cultivate some moral excellence in your life. What is moral excellence? Now, depending upon what version you have, you may go home and you read it and you're going to say, it's going to say something like this. Supplement or add to your faith a generous amount of goodness or virtue or moral character. That really doesn't add a whole lot, does it? I mean, because as we're going to continue to read this, certain things such as goodness, he's going to kind of cover this a little bit more later. Kind of the idea of a moral character, he's going to kind of cover that a little bit more later. So what does he mean when he says you need to cultivate some moral excellence in your life? Well, I found it really fascinating this week as I began to dig into this a little bit. And by the way, I am not a Greek scholar, so don't stop and think of me. I stopped and I started reading guys who kind of are much smarter than I am. And what they begin to say this is the word that Paul was using here is not a word for the idea of morality. He's not saying add morality to your faith. But by the way, okay, do be moral in your faith. That's not what he's not saying excellence, strive for excellence, strive for greatness. He's not saying that. He's stopping and he uses a word that was associated with Roman soldiers. Okay, Paul's in prison sitting next to a Roman soldier, and as he looks over, he says, there is a character trait that Roman soldiers have that I want you to have. It was called a moral excellence. Now, don't get me wrong. Roman soldiers were known at times to be extremely cruel and terrible. So when he was looking at him saying, as I'm looking at this Roman soldier and you need some moral excellence like this soldier who sits beside me, he was not saying, hey, all Roman soldiers are morally great people. He's not saying that. Don't even think of that. What he is trying to say is that a Roman soldier was given certain characteristics that when he went into battle, if he was a good soldier, he was to have. A Roman soldier was trained to have courage and discipline. Okay, now I know we sit here today in Pensacola, which is predominantly a military town, right? Some of you guys are going to understand this. A Roman soldier with moral excellence acted on what he was trained to do. When he went into battle, he stood up and acted courageously with duty, honor, valor. He did not act out in fear. A Roman soldier was not to be one who did his own thing. He was not to act out in anger. By the way, you guys know this as well as I do. When someone gets mad and angry, how do they respond? Chaotically. Nothing good comes from chaos. Paul is looking at him saying, guys, here's what you need. You need some moral excellence. You need courage and discipline to live out your life. You need moral excellence, courage and discipline. We need duty, honor, valor. Peter is looking at us, reminding us that if you want your faith to thrive, if you want your life to thrive, you need to cultivate in your life some moral excellence. You need to cultivate some discipline and courage into your life. Why do we need this moral excellence? Why do we need discipline and courage? Because each and every one of us face a battle every day of our lives. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, the battle you face is real. By the way, the battle we face is not with our government, either federal or state. It is not with our neighbor. It is not with our bosses. It is not with our family. I mean, we can go down. We find ourselves in battle, but sometimes we find ourselves in the wrong battle. The battle we face is much closer to home. The battle that you need moral excellence in, or you need some courage and discipline, has nothing to do with what the government is going to do or not do. James tells us where we need to have courage. In James chapter 1, Jesus' half-brother, he says this: temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us down. You need courage and discipline because the battle that you are facing sits within. You guys know this as well as I do. I didn't wake up this morning going, I'm going to reveal something to a whole lot of people who just don't know this. I mean, you know this. The battle that you face and the battle that I face is not out there. It's not with my in-laws. It's not with my government. It's not with my neighbors. It's not with my HOA. It is the battle that I face as I look in the mirror. We need a courage and a discipline because the way we find ourselves and our faith is it's a struggle to live it out the way we should. Can I just say this? Sometimes being a follower of Jesus Christ is not popular. Did you ever find this to be true? And I'm just saying, even within the realm of followers of Jesus Christ, doing what you know is right is sometimes, there's followers of Jesus Christ saying, and you say, no, that's not what God says we should do. And I know what I need to do, and it's not popular even right now. There are times when to stand up and just to do the right thing and follow Jesus Christ and say, I'm going to just follow it simply as I understand him. I'm just going to obey. It is not cool. It is not popular. We do not like the idea of being alone or different. We don't like being ridiculed as simple, as weak, or even uneducated. And sometimes we feel like walking away from what we know is right. The battle that we face needs courage and discipline, not to fight out there, but to battle both within my mind and within my heart. It's a battle in my mind and within my heart because, do you realize this? Sometimes following Jesus Christ will put you at a disadvantage. When you are called to follow Jesus Christ, it sometimes is not only not popular, sometimes it will put you at a disadvantage. When I was in college, I had a business professor who made this statement, and whether and where he got it from, I don't know. But he said this: the only way people succeed in the business world today is to bend the rules. Now, he wasn't encouraging us to do it. What he was saying is that you guys just need to understand you're playing on an unfair advantage. Sometimes to follow Jesus Christ puts you at a disadvantage. We need courage to do the right thing, even when it means it causes us to have to pay more taxes. It may mean we get refused for a loan or we miss out on a promotion. You need moral excellence, courage, discipline, not to fight your boss, but to fight the battle that lies within. We need courage and discipline because following Jesus Christ, there are sometimes I want to do what I know is not right. It's not just that there are things that sometimes we just go, I want to do that. You ever found yourself looking down and going, I want to buy that, and I know I don't have the money for that, but I so want to buy that. I'll just charge it, and hopefully I'm going to get a raise at the end of the year so I can pay it off. Okay, none of you guys have ever done that. I know that. You ever found yourself on a diet? Now, there's nothing right or wrong about this, but we know that the problem comes is that if you're ever on a diet, what do you want to do? You want to eat, and it's not just what you want to eat, it's that you want to eat what you know you shouldn't eat. That's where I'm going. The problem is, for a while there, my wife was trying to get me to do this fasting. 2 days on, fast for 2 days, not fast for the rest. And during that days of fasting, I was allowed 500 calories. Okay. Can I just say, the other 5 days a week when I was allowed to eat anything I wanted to, I just didn't, nothing ever tempted me. But on those 2 days, I can guarantee you every piece of chocolate spoke my name. Every donut shop that I walked past spoke my name. It just called out. And you know what? as a follower of Jesus Christ, there are moments and times in our lives when we know we shouldn't do something, when something is going to harm us and hurt us, and you know what we desire to do? There is a battle that we need moral excellence for. By the way, I love what in Proverbs, Solomon said this. Solomon, a guy who spent his life chasing after things to fulfill his desires, he comes in the middle of his life and he says this: there is a path before each person. Now, I've got to try to say this in a way that sounds wise, because Solomon was wise. You can almost imagine him sitting there going, I need to teach you something. There is a path before each person that seems right. But there is a need for moral excellence. You need courage. You need discipline, not to battle your boss, not to battle your government, not to battle your neighbors, not to battle your family. You need a moral excellence. You need courage and discipline to battle what is going on in your mind and in your heart. I'm going to do one more. You need moral excellence. You need courage. You need discipline. Because sometimes things do not work out the way you have planned. You know, there's a strange thing that when I was in my 20s, I could look forward and I saw things and I knew how I wanted my life to look and what it was going to act. And when a little setback came, it wasn't a big deal because I've got a plan. As I get older, each setback no longer causes me to bounce back like I once did. Some of you guys kind of understand this. You know where I'm at. All of a sudden, you have loved ones who pass away, that was not in the cards. You start having health issues that was not in the plan. You start having financial difficulties that were not in the plan. You start having relationship difficulties that were not in the plan. There are things that are so out of your control that this is not in the plan, and I work everything I can to get the plan on track. And not only do I work, I pray, and I pray, and I pray, and what happens? God sometimes says, this is not my will for your life. Some of you understand what that's like. Some of you are still to discover what this is like. Peter is sitting in a prison waiting his death. It is said, and we don't know this at 100% sure, but what we're told is that Peter was crucified, which was the Roman tradition of putting people to death. And Peter went to his cross and he said, do not crucify me like my Savior, crucify me upside down. Life is not always easy. It does not always work out as planned. Things do not always go the way we want. And sometimes it seems like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. You need moral excellence. You need courage and discipline because the battle that you are facing is real in your life just as it is real in my life. However, moral excellence, courage, and discipline doesn't just happen. I don't wake up one day and go, whew, I'm strong today. I've got courage. When I do not learn to cultivate moral excellence, I do not wake up with courage. You know what I wake up with? Fear, anxiety, depression. And by the way, I am no different than anyone else. These things are as real in my life as they are in yours. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what the future holds. and I become afraid. Choosing courage and discipline is something that we all must learn to do. And in fact, there's a couple of things that we can do that help us learn moral excellence. And by the way, this is not just an extensive list, but there's a couple of key things that I want to share with you that will help you cultivate courage and discipline. So I'm going to look at two. I'm only going to give you two because that's all we got time for. But if you can just put these two things in your life, it will help you begin to cultivate courage. It doesn't sound, they're not big, they're not hard, but they're valuable. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, Peter was writing to the same group of churches, and he makes this statement. He says this, stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. The first way that we can begin to cultivate discipline and courage is basically by being alert or recognizing I can stumble like anyone else. There are certain things that will come into your life that will tempt you, that will cause you to go, oh, there's a little wobble in my faith for a moment. Each of us have a spot in our strength and in our armor that just is a little weaker than it should be. A desire to get ahead financially, needing to be respected, the desire to have fun, the desire to win. And by the way, all these things are not bad, they're good. But when we are not careful, we can allow what can be a good thing to become a chink in our armor that says, in order to get, and we allow something to draw us away from. Be aware. So all we're saying is, number one, how to build courage, how to build discipline. Be aware of who you are and the things that cause you to wobble. Number two. By the way, did you hear I didn't say cut them out? Being financially secure is not a bad thing. Learning to have a name that is respected is not a bad thing. Learning to stop and have fun in life, to enjoy life, is not a bad thing. There's these things that are not bad. What we're saying is beware of what can cause me to wobble, that I will do whatever in order to gain. Be aware. Number two, simple, and you can do it this week. Number two, in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10, Paul gives us another word. He says the final word. Be strong in the Lord. Have courage and in his mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against the strategies of the devil. I kind of put on here, learn to rely on God. Practice relying on God. This is simple to say. The idea of saying this is like, you knew this already. We don't need some guy to stand up front and waste an hour of his life to say, hey, learn to rely on God. But how do we do it? If we could do it, we'd be doing it already, wouldn't we? Here's the thing. Learning to rely on God is simply putting things into your life. God, help me to allow your word. Learn to memorize a scripture verse so that it rolls in your mind. There is no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God, who is faithful, will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way of escape so that you may be able to bear. What verse do you need to put in your mind? Be not weary in well-doing, but in due season you shall reap if you do not faint. What verse do you need to put in your mind that allows it to just roll? When that time comes, it rolls. There are things that you can do that will allow you to rely. Maybe you need to learn to practice singing songs. God is so good. God is so good. What are we doing? we're putting our mind to a place of learning to rely. He's a good, good Father. Yes, you are. Okay, I'm not going to try to sing. I'll embarrass everyone. What are we doing? We're finding ways to allow ourselves to rely. There are things that you can do in your life to stop, and whether it is to say, I need to find someone who's a Christian that I can call when the time is hard. I need someone I can call and just say, hey, can we just talk for a few minutes? I'm not needing an answer. I just need to talk. A soldier's courage comes when he acts on what he has been trained to do. No soldier wakes up and is strong and courageous in battle because someone gave him a gun. It is because he has learned skilled and he has honed his skills. He has learned to put fear out of his mind and to allow what he knows to take over. In every situation, you can thrive when you learn to stop and allow the promises that he has given you to be cultivated with moral excellence. To fight the battles that you are going to face from within. Thriving in every situation is possible. It's not always easy. And sometimes some of us stumble. But we have been given a promise that we have been given everything we need to thrive in every circumstance. We just need to learn to cultivate some things to go with our faith. The battle that you face is real. And it is especially hard because you're battling yourself. Being aware of your weakness and learning to rely on God will begin to help give you the strength and the courage you need.